So about this Breonna Taylor situation, I didn't want to publicly discuss my perspective. But you know what? I did receive a lot of feedback in my inbox, people asking, to hear my perspective and wanting to have an open conversation about it. So therefore I said, you know what? YOLO. I might as well just share it publicly. I don't really care. I welcome if anyone wants to discuss it, if anyone wants to share a different perspective, I'm very open to it. I welcome it. As long as we keep it respectful, we keep it based on the facts. I know emotions are running very high right now, but I am open to any conversations that oppose my viewpoint. And in fact, if there's anything that I don't know, any missing information, I also welcome that. Now, I want to start the video by saying Black Lives Matter, of course, because I don't want anyone thinking that my if there's sides to take, the sides that I'm taking is of the sides of the oppressors. No, I do believe Black Lives Matter. I do believe that there is systemic racism. I do believe that there is discrimination in our policing and in policies that are currently in place. I do believe that crime statistics are incredibly warped and they're based on slave codes that have been in system and not yet eradicated completely in our constitution. So I just want to mention all of that beforehand. I am a proponent of Black power, Black empowerment, all of that, equal rights for all of that. So that's just my disclaimer before I start. I also want to, in order to have this conversation, you have to have an open mind. So I want to pose this scenario for you. I want you to consider this for a moment. Let's say I worked in an elementary school, like a special elementary school or whatever. And let's say it was part of my job, like this was in my job that I was supposed to provide snacks for the students in my class. Before students are registered for the school, the parents are given a paper, or they're given a questionnaire where they have to fill out all the information, and part of the information asks for allergies, medical conditions, all of that things, and that's submitted to the school. Now the school system hands that over to the nurse. Then the nurse puts it into the system so that all teachers can have access to it across the district, let's just say, if that was the situation. Of course, that's not what happens in public school, but I just want you to just consider that scenario for a moment. Let's say I, as a teacher now, I have to go buy snacks for my kids. So I log into the system, I check the information, and I list out all the allergies, and I make sure that I buy snacks that no one is allergic to. So I bring the snacks in for my kids to eat, and unfortunately and tragically, one of the students in the class ends up dying from an allergic reaction to the snacks that I brought. And it's not like there were hidden ingredients or anything. And look back in the system, there's nothing listed as far as the kid being allergic to that thing. So now, what do you think? Should I, as the teacher, be held responsible? If it was my job to provide the snacks, I followed the protocol and I searched to make sure that I didn't buy any snacks anyone was allergic to, and I provided the snacks. Should I be arrested? Should I be fired? What should happen to me? Logically speaking, my perspective on that is absolutely nothing for me. It's a tragic situation and something needs to happen. But for me, I did exactly what I was employed to do. That's the first situation. Now, let's say, for example, it was the nurse. The nurse didn't properly document the student's allergies. Should I be held responsible, or should the nurse be held responsible? And in that situation, I would say the nurse should be held responsible because it was due to their negligent act, which resulted in the tragic situation that occurred. And let's even take it one step further. What if it was the parent that did not list the allergy on the paper? Should the nurse now be held responsible for the information that the parents didn't provide? I would say no. Now the responsibility is on the parent, even though the trickle effect is that it's the snack that I bought that led ultimately to the child's death. But however, there was no way for me to know that the child has this allergy. We followed every single protocol. We asked the parents to list out things, and unfortunately, this was an unfortunate situation. So in this situation, if you are able to consider that situation and say, okay, the teacher was not at fault, then keep listening. Now, if you're like, no, the teacher needs to go to jail and the teacher needs to be fired, just stop listening here, because that just means that your mind is already made up and you will not understand the perspective or where I'm coming from, and nothing that I'm going to say is going to change your mind. And the purpose of the video is not to change your mind. It's just to provide my perspective on this situation. So if at all, and most of you already know where I'm going, but if at all you feel as though, no, the teacher, because the teacher bought the snacks, the teacher should be arrested and put in jail, then just stop watching now. So now on to the Breonna Taylor situation. So the facts of the case. Here are the facts of the case. One, it was a no-knock warrant. Two, the her boyfriend fired. Her boyfriend was protecting the home, so he shot at the police officers. The second fact is that the police officers returned fire. Those are the facts in evidence. If there's more that I don't know, then feel free to provide that information, because my mind is not completely solid, unmalleable, unchangeable, anything like that. So those are the facts that I'm working off of right now. In order for you to obtain a no-knock warrant, there is a system or a process that you need to go through. One of the system and process is that there needs to be an investigation, there needs to be a filing, there needs to be like a whole entire system. A judge has to sign off on it, like, okay, you provided enough evidence, we are going to sign this no-knock warrant, and it goes through an entire process before it gets executed. So now, a no-knock warrant is for two reasons. So no-knock warrants, and we're not, right now, I'm not arguing on the legality of no-knock warrants or the morality of no-knock warrants, but I can understand why no-knock warrants may be necessary, or why they may even grant no-knock warrants. So typically, and they may grant it for other situations, but typically, no-knock warrants are for two situations. One, it's to prevent giving the perpetrators the chance of destroying evidence. So let's say, for example, a cop is going to go arrest somebody, and there's evidence in the residence of the person they're going to arrest. So one reason for a no-knock warrant is not to give the person the opportunity to destroy the evidence, or to destroy the evidence before they get in. That's one situation where no-knock warrants are granted. And the second situation that I'm aware of that no-knock warrants is if the perpetrator is an extremely dangerous person. So if they're an extremely dangerous person, what they will do is give a no-knock warrant to not give the perpetrator the opportunity to weapon up and then cause injury to the police officer and put the police officer's life in danger. Usually no-knock warrants, like usually their perception of what a no-knock warrant does is that it stuns the person and it limits the amount of violence. So it stuns the person, it catches them off guard, and it doesn't give them the opportunity to prepare themselves in order to do anything violent or anything criminal. Usually they're executed either early in the morning, late at night, things like that. Like the most times where people are usually not prepared for it, that's when no-knock warrants are. So the police officers were given a no-knock warrant. So there's something called a warrant officer. A warrant officer is kind of like similar to a repo man, let's just say. So when a repo man goes and repossesses your car, is your battle with the repo man? It shouldn't be, because the repo man is just doing a job. A company gave a repo man, they're like, we need you to repossess this. This person's non-payment, blah, blah, blah. So the repo man says, okay, they take the address, they take the information, they go repossess the car. Now the person whose car is being repossessed, you need to take up your battle with the company that sent the repo man, but your battle is not with the repo man. So back to the Breonna Taylor situation. So the warrant officers were given this warrant. The warrant was a no-knock warrant. They said, okay, there is a perpetrator. They are at this address. It is a no-knock warrant because this person is possibly dangerous. Go execute this warrant. The officers were under the impression that everybody else had already done their job. The system, because no-knock warrants don't just get, it's not like you decide whether you want to do a no-knock or not. Like there's specific, it says no-knock warrant on it. So they went and they executed the no-knock warrant. They burst in the door, and Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend were, sleeping or whatever it was. And he decided, oh, there's an assailant in my house. There's somebody breaking into my house. So he defended the home. And then the police officers being shot at defended themselves and shot back. And unfortunately and tragically, it was during that return fire that Breonna Taylor was struck and ultimately killed. So my question now is that if they followed protocol, it was a no-knock warrant, which is exactly what they did. And they did not just go in guns blazing, starting to shoot, expecting there to be violence. They actually returned fire. Why are we holding them responsible? I'm not seeing, in my perspective, why they specifically should be held responsible for this situation. Now, I do understand that it is tragic and that somebody's life was lost. And when a life is lost, somebody needs to be held accountable. I also do understand the following things. One, the person they were looking for was not even at that address. That was not his current living residence. I understand that. Two, the There was a second thing I understand. Two, the person had already been apprehended and he was in police custody. So here's what we actually need to do. And here's where I am still saying that justice needs to be served, but in such a way that we find where the gap happened, who dropped the ball exactly. I do not feel as though that it was directly caused by the police officer. So perhaps we need to trace it back to who didn't do their research to find out if the guy still lived there. And that person who wrote that as the address without formally checking whether that's true, maybe hold that person responsible. Or perhaps the person that did not put it into the system, to make sure that the person, or check in the system to make sure the person wasn't apprehended, maybe hold that person responsible. But I don't feel as though the cops who were just executing a no-knock warrant, who were executing the warrant, who followed protocol, who did not first shoot, who actually just returned fire in defense of themselves, I don't feel as though that they should now be arrested, charged, and their lives be ruined for something like that. Yes, I agree, it's happening too often. Yes, I agree in the cases of African Americans and Black individuals that more times than not, it ends up in death. But we cannot be so blind to not be able to differentiate between when something is actual overt racism and when something is not. Just because a white police officer shoots a Black assailant does not always mean that it was due to racism. And I refuse to believe that every single situation where a white police officer shoots a Black man, that is the case. I refuse to believe that. So in this situation, my perspective is that because the police officers followed protocol and because the death was as a result of return fire, of them defending themselves, I don't feel as though they should be charged. I don't. Now, here's what needs to happen. In my perspective, here's where we need to put our efforts. Rather than shouting, arrest the cops, and being satisfied with them arresting the cops is not going to fix anything. What we need to be fighting is the policy. So I understand that no-knock warrants have their benefits, but however, if it is continuously ending up in the death of innocents and putting people in danger, then the consequences outweighs the benefits. So maybe we need to start looking into the policies that are permitting these no-knock warrants. Maybe we need to completely disband the no-knock warrant, like completely eradicate no-knock warrants in general, because maybe that was the issue, the fact that it was a no-knock warrant. Also, maybe we need to look into, so perhaps, and I say this and I haven't done the research on this, perhaps in African American situations, when it's an African American assailant, perhaps it's too easy to grant a no-knock warrant. Perhaps that they don't do as deep of an investigation before they grant the no-knock warrant. Perhaps. Maybe that's something we need to look into. Perhaps we need to look into the fact that, or I'm not saying it's fact, but the fact that no-knock warrants are granted more in African American cases than in white cases. Perhaps that's something we need to look into. Now, in those situations, yes, we do need to see if that's what's happening, then something needs to change. There needs to be a change. There needs to be a research. People need to study these situations. But in this specific case, the police officers in question did follow protocol. They shot in self-defense, which ended tragically in Breonna Taylor's death. Now, also, my perspective as well is that if Breonna Taylor's boyfriend struck a police officer, and he had a legal firearm and he was registered and all that, and he struck a police officer and the police officer died, he was justified as well. And he should not go into jail. And I'm not sure if he was charged with anything, and I hope he was not, because he was defending the home. So that's absolutely fine. I would be on the front lines. If he was charged with whatever, I would be on the front lines like, no, this is not justice, because he was defending his home, which he has every legal right to do. And he did not know that it was police officers breaking into his residents. So my perspective on this is that when we're fighting, what we're doing right now is that we're looking for a scapegoat. We're looking for where to place the blame. We're angry, we're tired, we're hurt, and it just keeps happening over and over and over again. To innocent Black lives are being lost day in and day out. So we're just angry. And we want to see justice being served. But in this situation, just arresting the cops would not be justice. Because this right here was not as a result, in my opinion. It could be, but in my opinion, based on the facts, not the feelings, in my opinion, this is not overtly based on the race. And in addition, they didn't even know who was shooting. So it wasn't like they saw, oh, this is the wrong person, and then, started shooting. No, they didn't see who was shooting. According to the warrant, and a no-knock warrant, keep in mind, can be granted on the basis of the assailant being a violent person. They were probably shooting back because this is what a no-knock warrant is. There's a violent person. The person is weaponed up. They're shooting me. My life is in danger. I'm going to shoot in self-defense. Also, just keep in mind, there was a situation that happened in 2014 in Georgia. It was I can't remember the name, but you can look it up. But there was a white family, and the police officers executed a no-knock warrant with this white family. And what happened with this white family, they were under the impression there were drugs and guns and things in the home. So what they did is they executed a no-knock warrant, and they threw in a flash grenade, or I think it was a flash grenade, and it ended up in the playpen of a little 18-month-old child. And that 18-month-old child suffered third-degree burns and really intense injuries that they actually had to put the child in an induced coma. And it turned out that the person they were looking for wasn't even their residence. That's not where they lived. That wasn't their residence. And there were no guns, no weapons, no drugs in the home. In that situation, again, the police officers were not indicted. They were cleared of any charges in that situation as well. So when we're saying this is all about race and this is no justice and things like that, I don't necessarily agree with that. What we need to look into, I do believe defund the police, and more specific, because I don't like the phrase defund, diversify the funds that are going into the police department into other avenues and social institutions. I do believe in that, but I feel as though that right now we're losing sight of where the fault should be. And that's my perspective on this situation.